Hello friends, thanks for joining me today. This is my July monthly wrap-up coming to you basically at the end of August. It's been a really crazy busy first half of August. When I would normally film this, me and my fiance are in the process of trying to close on a house, which is really exciting and it kind of came out of nowhere. So we've just been really busy focusing on that, and I haven't found any time to film. So this anyway is my July wrap up, a little bit late, but still hope you enjoy. So I will just go ahead and get into it. So the first book that I finished was the audiobook for Ship of Smoke and Steel by Django Wexler and narrated by Katherine Ho. And this is the first in a trilogy. And first of all, the name Django Wexler sounds made up. Like, not in a bad way, but it just sounds made up to me. Second of all, I really enjoyed it. So the protagonist is a girl named Isoka, who is basically a gang enforcer in the port city of Kanzoka, and she has the ability to tap into one of the wells of sorcery, and that's what the series is called, actually, the Wells of Sorcery. And there are several wells, and I can't remember all of them at this point or how many there are, but she can access the Well of Combat called Melos, and she uses it to basically keep troublemakers in line. She's a ward boss, and one day the Emperor's spy master discovers her ability that she's kept under wraps and threatens to kill her sister if she doesn't do what they say. And she's tasked with commandeering this legendary ghost ship called Soliton. And once she's on this ginormous ship, like impossibly large, like you can walk for hours and never find either end of it. The word ship is kind of misleading. But once she's on Soliton, she has to survive living among a rough crew full of other magic users who kind of have their own rules and hierarchy, and has to find a way to gain control of this ship. And this was a 5-star read for me. This was just fun, fast-paced, high-octane fantasy that was just full of battles against these crustacean-like creatures because you're on a ship. It has a cool magic system. The full extent of it isn't explained in detail. It's much more show than tell, and if you don't see it happen on screen, then there isn't much that you know about it. But what you do see is really cool. Like, for another example, there is the Well of Speed called Rema that allows the user to move, insanely fast, inhumanly fast. And there's the Well of Mirkai, which allows the user to generate flame and throw fireballs. The setting on Soliton was so wild and interesting. It really sets a vibe. After the opening sequence, it takes place entirely on Soliton, but as I said, it's more like a mobile island on the ocean, so it doesn't feel small. You do feel cramped, but it's such a vast ship that it doesn't feel small. But this dank, grimy ship with mushrooms and algae growing everywhere, like just all these different ecosystems on this ship, basically, all these different decks and dangers. It was just so cool to imagine. It was almost like an alien planet, basically, at times. There's a sapphic romance between main characters, but the romance isn't like super prominent. It's there, but the focus is really on the action and the mystery of Isoka trying to figure out the secrets of Soliton and how she can accomplish her seemingly impossible goal. I thought it was awesome. I enjoyed every minute of it. It's very plot driven, but I still really liked all the characters for who they were and what you do know about them. The ending did feel abrupt, and the epilogue felt very rushed in my opinion, but it did leave me wanting to learn more and read more, and I really hope that book 2 delves deeper into the magic system, which will answer a couple questions I have related to the magic and things related to it. It's not the most elegant book I've ever read, but it's one of the most high octane and fun that I've read recently. Then I finished the second to last book in the Throne of Glass series, book 6, which is Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas, and this takes place at the same time as the events in book 5. But in this one, you're following completely different characters, specifically Chaol Westfall, who has been a main character since book 1. They're on a different continent, trying to convince the ruler there to lend his military support to their cause, as well as hopefully find a way to heal an injury that Chaol receives in a previous book. This was a solid 3.5 out of 5. I waffled back and forth between rounding down or up for Goodreads and ultimately decided to round down. It took about half the book for me to be really actively interested. Chaol is one of my least favorite characters, so that didn't help that this book was kind of centered around him, but it was kind of nice to have a break from the aggressive fae relationships from the previous book. The cast of main characters here are just regular humans, and I really liked the character Iren. I don't know how you pronounce that exactly. I'm pronouncing it Iren, who is introduced, and bless her heart for putting up with Chaol's crap in spite of everything. I can't talk details without major spoilers, but overall this was fine. It had moments that were really intense and interesting. Lots of others that were just meh. Learned some things about some other things and people. Super vague, but yeah, 3.5 out of 5. I'm looking forward to the conclusion of this saga, one book left, and hopefully seeing a bunch of cool fights. And I finished another audiobook called Vortex by Robert Charles Wilson. This is the third and final book in the Spin trilogy. So I have completed another series, entirely audiobook, which is a first for me. And in book 1, called Spin, you follow humanity in the wake of an event called the Spin, where one night, out of nowhere, the stars disappear. And it's because this sort of shell has encased the Earth from the outside, and time within the shell moves much slower than time outside it. I gave books 1 and 2 5 stars, really enjoyed both of them, and this one was just okay. I'm giving it 3 stars. It wasn't bad, but it was missing what books 1 and 2 had. I wasn't a fan of the dual timeline here, even though I usually don't have a problem with that kind of narrative, but I didn't care a whole lot about the recurring character Turk, who is from book 2, and I liked him just fine in book 2. I also didn't care much about the character named Allison, whose POV is in his timeline. I enjoyed all the moments related to what are referred to as the hypotheticals and the things we learn about them. I liked learning about, future history things. The ending was cool, some, big brain concepts there, but it was delivered via a character who was just there so that it could all work out in the end. I still really enjoyed the series and recommend it, but the ending just wasn't as good as the 2-book lead up, in my opinion. Then I finished this very pretty, hopefully the light isn't like glaring so you can't see it, this very pretty Owl Crate edition of A Forgery of Roses by Jessica S. Olsen. This is about a girl named Mira who has the power to use paintings to alter the physical state / appearance of a person or animal, and the wife of the governor learns her secret and threatens to expose her unless she uses her magic to bring her dead son back to life. It becomes clear that his death isn't just an accident, and Mira works with the governor's other son to try and solve the mystery while her own life is in danger. Oh, and during all this, she's trying to figure out a way to help her sister, who is gravely ill. So this was another middling, shrug, nothing special book. I'd give it 2.5 out of 5, and I've decided to round down for Goodreads. Just wasn't really good enough to justify bumping it up. The world building was barely there, and I've learned that that's important to me. I really like world building. The people in this town worship a being called the Great Artist, but that isn't elaborated or focused on at all, except as the reason for the governor to hate our main character. I had to use sparse context clues to picture what sort of time period this is based off of, but at times it also felt fairly modern. The plot pacing was kind of all over the place, focusing on different things throughout it in a way that felt incohesive. The magic system was an interesting concept, but the way it was put into practice wasn't actually very interesting. There are lots of moments where Mira tries and fails to make her magic work, and it started to get boring and repetitive to keep reading about her failure and it not working. I didn't care about the romance. The love interest has anxiety, and that plays a prominent role in the story. I can't speak to how accurate the representation is personally. That seemed okay to me, maybe just not very nuanced, but some reviews I saw kind of criticized the rep, so I don't know, but I just didn't care about the romance between the two of them. There were a few emotional scenes that were quite sad and, you know, did make me feel something, but it all came together as nothing very memorable. So 2 out of 5 stars. And finally, I did finish off this month on a very high note. I finally read Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. This is the first book in a fantasy trilogy. The main character is a girl named Mia Corvair, and she comes from a high-profile family, and her father is executed for treason, and her mom and baby brother are imprisoned. She manages to escape and is taken in by a retired assassin of the Red Church, and she trains under him for years to be worthy and capable of being accepted as an acolyte of the Red Church, this church of murder, to learn their ways to eventually be strong enough to seek revenge against the people who destroyed her family. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I haven't read a fantasy book where so many elements that I love, some that I probably couldn't even articulate, came together so well and made me feel so excited and engrossed for like a year. So this book is told in the form of a story told by an unknown narrator to the reader, and this narrator makes use of footnotes that contain these delightful bits of world building. And as I said, I just love world building. I've realized that's something that I look for and crave in fantasy, and this just has wonderful world building, just little bits of random facts about the world and its history. And in that way, it reminded me so much of the Bartimaeus trilogy by Jonathan Stroud, which is one of my favorite series that I grew up with. If you know of any other fantasy books that kind of have that trope that use like cheeky footnotes in their storytelling, please let me know, because I really enjoy that. The prose is very rich and on the flowery side, which normally I don't love, but here it just worked once I got used to it. The first chapter is a little odd. It switches very rapidly between a past and a present timeline, and then after the first chapter it still has a sort of dual timeline set up, more like lots of memory flashbacks really, but it doesn't happen as frequently, the shifts, as that first chapter. The first chapter is a little bit, it's a lot. But this was fast-paced with lots of action and tense scenes. It was very bloody. It just felt darker than most things that I've read recently in a refreshing way. A bit edgy. You know, this was a bit edgy, but in like the best way. There isn't a magic system per se, but there are characters who can do some cool things, and Mia herself can do stuff related to shadows. Another character's ability has to do with manipulating blood. It's all just really cool. The characters are all great. Mia has a rival at the Red Church who I wanted to see destroyed. There's a light romance that doesn't overwhelm the story, which is what I prefer. Though there are a couple short, fairly explicit scenes that surprisingly I didn't mind. I typically don't love explicit sexy scenes, but I didn't mind it here. The setting feels unique and full of its own history and lore. I just love this a lot. This was just the kind of fantasy pick-me-up I was hoping to stumble across. It all just worked for me. I loved it. If you like assassin and training stories and sort of magical school settings and competitions and brutality, check this out. I really hope that the rest of the series is on this level. So those are the books that I read this month, along with a couple audiobooks. Yeah, again, really sorry this is so late. I almost contemplated not filming a July wrap-up and just combining like a July and August wrap-up. That would have been probably a very long video, and I just like being able to put out something monthly. So I went ahead and filmed this, and even though it's late, hope you guys still enjoyed. Yeah, I'm hoping that a month from now, I will be moved into a new house and my setup will look a little different. It will certainly not be finalized. It's a bigger house than we're in now, and it's gonna take some time to furnish it and make it look good, but we're really, really excited. So yeah, hopefully next time you see me, I will be in the house that we're gonna be living in for many years to come. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!